Hi, I'm Lindsey, and I'm talking with MedTech industry leaders on how they change lives for a better world.
The inventions and technologies are fascinating, and so are the people who work with them.
There was a period of time where I realized fundamentally my job was to go hang out with really smart people that are saving lives and then do work that would help them save more lives.
I got into the business to save lives, and it is incredibly motivating to work with people who are in that same business, saving or improving lives.
What better industry than where I get to wake up every day and just save people's lives?
These are extraordinary people doing extraordinary work, and this is The Leading Difference.
Hello, and welcome back to another episode of the Leading Difference podcast. I'm your host, Lindsey, and I'm so excited to introduce you to my guest today, Holly Rockweiler. Holly is co-founder and CEO of Madorra, a women's health company dedicated to changing the treatment paradigm for vaginal atrophy and dryness. She co-founded Madorra as a spin-out of the Stanford Biodesign Fellowship, where she implemented ethnographic research to identify unmet clinical needs and define user, market, and product requirements for solutions in women's health, urology, and infectious disease. Prior to biodesign, she worked as a senior research scientist at Boston Scientific, where she developed therapies to enable more efficient care for patients living with heart failure. Her preclinical and clinical research has led to more than 20 pending and issued patents. Holly holds an MS and a BS in biomedical engineering from Washington University in St. Louis.
Welcome, Holly. It's so wonderful to have you here today. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I was wondering if you wouldn't mind starting off by telling us a little bit about yourself and your background, and maybe what led you to the MedTech industry.
Sure. So let's see. So my background is in biomedical engineering. I majored in biomedical engineering. Maybe I can say why. I knew that I wanted to be an engineer. I felt like, well, first of all, as a woman in math and science, growing up when I did, every teacher told me to be an engineer, but I didn't really know what that meant till I got to college. But I liked it, pursued engineering, and I started undecided, but very quickly found that I was most just excited about the problems in the biomedical engineering field. I remember one of my classes was like, calculate the torque of a drill on a tooth. And I was like, wow, that's amazing. I think I found it. So majored in biomedical engineering, got my master's and bachelor's at WashU in St. Louis. And then I went to work for Boston Scientific. And so they are a medical device company. And so that's obviously how I got into it. But I did seek that out. When I was thinking about what did I want to do, I thought about chemistry was never an area I felt very strongly about. I liked stuff I could hold in my hands and really conceptualize. And so I think that's what led me more in the device road, and then had an incredible opportunity to work at Boston Scientific. And so I worked there for several years in their implantable cardiac division. So that's pacemakers and ICDs, working in the research department. So that was also really cool because we were on the front end helping to define the next generation products, and was able to also work very cross-functionally. So just because research conceived of an idea didn't mean it was going to be in the product development, had to help it go forward. And obviously we were keyed in very closely with the marketing team to understand what were the needs that we were solving. So it was an incredible introduction to our industry. And then I decided that I wanted to try a smaller company. There was just some broader themes of working in a large company that didn't totally jive for me. And so I was like, well, I don't know the first thing about startups. So I had heard about the Stanford Biodesign program, which is where I went next. And the company that I started, Madorra, is a spin out of that program.
Wow. Okay, so your path is really cool. And I love that you are an engineer, and I love your passion behind it too. Just hearing you talk about that one random problem and your excitement about it. I adore that. I do. Because that is not my leaning. So whenever I hear somebody just get really excited about that kind of thing, I'm like, yes, tell me more.
Well, you're in the right field too, I would say.
Indeed. Indeed. So yeah, I'm just curious. Okay, so So going back just a little bit, you started off at Boston Scientific and kind of developed this appreciation for the medical device space and innovation. And then with Stanford Biodesign, can you tell me a little bit about being a part of that and then how you were able to spin off into your own company? I mean, that's like a one sentence thing that you put in there, but I know that it took a lot of work, and I'd just love to hear about that process and your
Totally.
experience.
So absolutely. So the Stanford Biodesign program has many different facets. I was part of the fellowship, but they also have classes they teach and books and online resources. And then other universities have kind of sister programs around the world, frankly. So I was very interested in joining the program, like I said, to kind of what I was telling myself was like a way to dip my toe in the water of what a smaller company would be like. Now, that's not at all what Stanford pitches the biodesign program as. Really, what it is an academic training program for an innovation process. And that's what they teach you. Now, there are a lot of companies that end up spinning out of it. And so I thought, well, maybe, like I said, this is a way to dip my toe in the water. But also, if I decide I want to come back to a larger company setting, this skill set still would be highly useful given what I want to do in my career. So that's what I set out to do. And so the program I love, I think is fantastic. It, as described initially, it's this innovation process, and they teach you that in a very hands-on way. So first you start with really understanding and building a list of unmet needs. And so that starts by looking for problems. In Stanford Hospital, you kind of have this unfettered access. As an engineer, it was the first time I had that to, observe and ask questions and talk to physicians and patients and other healthcare professionals. And then you end up with obviously a long list of problems that you can find, just like anywhere in the world, right? This could happen, but also in healthcare, it happens. And then you translate those problems into what the program calls need statements. So really, there's a lot packed into that. But once you have those, then you spend the bulk of the program actually learning how to filter that long list of problems down into a couple key top unmet needs that you're working on. And so again, their goal is academic. They want to their product is the people. They want to teach people this process and have them go out and share this process and use it to be successful in whatever, vein they end up going down. And so I just had a conversation with my husband this weekend. I was like, we were talking about something interpersonal. And I said, well, the unmet need here really is this. So it certainly has, I've drank the Kool-Aid completely and love to share it. But what happens because you're working hands on these projects, you very often, which was the case for myself and my co-founders, by the end of the year, you may have something that you're pretty passionate about. And so what has now become my about me description is working in women's health. I had no idea how passionate I would be about it. I feel like I kind of backed my way into it, but now kind of reviewing that history, it's like, oh, maybe I was always kind of destined for this given my interest in activism. So kind of combining all of this together is what led us here. So spinning it out was a consequence of having a lot of hard work with my team throughout the year. And we had other projects too, but this became the one that kind of survived every stage gate. And we ended up spinning out into the company Madorra.
Wonderful. Well, thank you for sharing a little bit about that. And also, I love the crossover into real life. Not that that's not real life, but to your daily life as well. Oh my gosh, that's great. I'm just expecting that. Okay, so can we talk now a little bit about your company and the product that you've developed and where you're kind of looking to take it in the future?
Certainly. So again, being born out of Stanford, we started with an unmet need around creating a treatment for vaginal dryness and atrophy for postmenopausal women that didn't rely on hormones. So this is a problem that I had never heard of before we literally met patients with this problem and talked to providers about this problem. And as we started researching, realized, wow, up to 75% of all postmenopausal women are dealing with some, degree of this. How have we not heard of this before? That is a striking number of people. And so as we continued to do our research, very quickly learned the gold standard treatment here is hormone therapy. But even though this market is huge, only 7% of the market is using hormones today. And so that there's a lot of reasons why, but that's really what motivated us to say, wow, there needs to be another option. Because if you don't want hormones right now, the only other FDA cleared product or category for treating this are over-the-counter lubricants and moisturizers. And those are, like, both of the products that exist today are really, those categories are really great, but they're not enough. And again, with 43 million women in the United States with this problem, like, we need more than just those two categories. And it really felt like no one had really looked at this. I mean, hormones, again, are a good solution for the patients who want to or can use them. But for patients who can't, for example, breast cancer survivors, they're stuck with, just kind of subsisting off these over-the-counter products that really are not enough when your case is more moderate or severe. And so we said, well, let's look at this and see if there's a better way or, something we could combine, and ended up developing the idea for what is now the main product that we're developing at Madorra, which is a home use device that uses ultrasound to really rekindle the body's natural lubricating process. And so our whole goal has been to be very supportive of the other products in this category. We think hormones should be used more often than they are, frankly, but that women shouldn't have to make a compromise. If they don't want to use hormones, then they should have other options. And that's where we come in. So our product it's not on the market yet. We're working towards that. But when it's out there, what we envision is a prescription happens from the gynecologist, and then the patient uses the product at home on a regular basis to, like I said, kind of revitalize that natural process. And what patients have told us they like about this is that it is restarting their own natural lubrication rather than some exogenous hormone or chemical. And there's less of a kind of a goop ick factor, than having to use these over-the-counter things. Which again, I like say that not to say that those don't have their place, because they absolutely do, but it's not enough. And so we're pre-FDA clearance, but we have a breakthrough designation from FDA. So that's feather in our cap and will help us get through the agency more expeditiously. And we have done several clinical trials and look forward. We've published one of those trials in our first manuscript, and we look forward to putting more of our data out there to help really lay the foundation to say, yeah, ultrasound is an appropriate approach to treating this and has virtually no side effects. So this should be a great option to be available to as many people as possible.
Oh, that is incredible. Oh my goodness. Well, yeah, first of all, again, it boggles my mind, and it probably shouldn't anymore, but it continues to when you tell me statistics like this, that 75% of women who are in this situation or have this concern or whatnot, and you just think, but you're addressing it in a way that's so innovative, and yet though that hasn't really been addressed yet. And it happens again and again with healthcare for women. And I'm wondering, you mentioned earlier being very passionate about this. So I'm wondering if you can speak a little bit to femtech and women's health and how you're involved in helping to push the conversation forward. Because I know that can be a little challenging at times.
Absolutely. Yeah. And well, it's super fascinating too, because we spun out of Stanford in 2014. So we're coming up on 10 years here, and the conversation is so different today than it was just 10 years. I mean, it is a decade, but it feels like yesterday. Like, a lot has changed. When we first were starting, femtech wasn't a hashtag. Like, that was not a conversation. And people would say like, ooh, that's a niche. Yeah. And that doesn't happen anymore, which is really great. So, well, that's certainly progress. So we should acknowledge that and be proud of everyone who's worked towards creating that progress. So I think what's been interesting, though, is like the pace of progress, maybe. So it's very exciting to know that there are, for instance, obviously I spend a lot of my time fundraising. There are women's health focused venture groups now. That's fantastic. That we just need bigger and bigger funds to be focused on that. We just need more and more. We need more of everything, right? I mean, one of many things I've been very surprised to learn is how little training physicians get on menopause specifically. And so that has to change. And so there's just like a lot. And so to the point of activism, like, there's a lot to say. And so I think it's being raised by parents who are feminists, that helps, I think, me just start by saying, well, no, this shouldn't be. We can do better, and we will do better. So that's helpful. And I think that's also what really keeps me going. Obviously, every job is hard. And in our startup world, this is certainly a emotional roller coaster. And so when I think about when I have harder days, it's like, wow. We've had patients tell us, for example, I can't believe you're even paying attention to this. I can't believe you're listening to what I have to say. And so one, that's disturbing. That's as little as it's needed to make someone feel better. But secondly, it's, wow, we can have such an impact by just being out there. So like the fact that we exist, I always think is helpful, and that we do things like this and have open conversations about vaginal health for an aging population. I will also say that a year ago at the Super Bowl last year, there was an ad for a hot flash drug. And so that's like, you know, the world stage, menopause is being discussed. That was not happening 10 years ago. So there is real progress being made. The last thing I want to say is that one thing I have also really appreciated about working in women's health is how supportive everyone is of everyone else. Anytime, even like our closest competitor, when I met their CEO, she was wonderful to me and, you know, shook my hand and said, how can I help you? And it's like, where else does that happen? That's incredible, I think, because we all see there's a lot of work to be done. We can't do it alone. We want to support each other.
Oh, I love that. Yeah, that is something that I have really admired and appreciated about the medtech industry. I think because people are curious and their mindset is very innovation, problem solving, how can I help? It seems like even with competitors, yes, we're maybe vying for similar people to sell to. However, there's this idea of camaraderie, which I don't find in a lot of industries. So yeah, to your point, I think it's really helpful to have those allies in the space because it's a little different.
Totally.
Yeah. So yeah, and I love what you were saying about these conversations are happening more and they're becoming more mainstream and less embarrassing or taboo, which sounds hilarious because it's 50% of the population or whatever. But anyway, the point being, it is exciting to see this continue to move forward. And I'm wondering, even as a company, obviously your next big hurdle is getting that FDA approval, going to market and whatnot. But as you continue down the road, what other kinds of problems are you looking to solve? Or are you not even there yet? This is just like, let's start here. We'll get into that later.
Yeah, no, it's a great question. I think like what kind of harkening back to the prior question about the community of women's health, it's like you can't go a day without finding 5 other problems that you want to solve. So absolutely. I think that, yeah, I mean, like with Madorra, we are very focused obviously on this technology and developing it, but we certainly have a roadmap of where this technology could go and other ideas of where to take it. And then what I find fascinating is that there is no menopause brand. Like no one owns menopause, which if I worked at Procter & Gamble or Kimberly Clark, I would be like, hopefully 15 years ago, I would have said, guys, let's do it. So it's very surprising to me. So I think there's a lot of opportunity. So would Madorra be that brand? I would love that. We would need a lot of other products to come together with us. So what I really see is a roll up in the future of multiple women's health products together. So I think that's exciting. In terms of also a little bit maybe more broadly speaking, and this is no surprise to you, I'm sure, or your listeners, that reimbursement is an area that needs massive, I don't know even the word. I was going to say like overhauling, but that sounds pretty drastic. It just needs to be clearer and cleaner and simpler in terms of a process. I'm not saying that we should be handing out reimbursement left and right, but any investor conversation I have is we go there immediately and it's like, okay, what's the path? Well, why do you think that's going to happen? And when, you know, XYZ other company had this happen, and we have a good strategy. I think I have a good pitch, but it just is an area that is really murky. And given that's a really critical piece in any business is how are you going to get paid? That's an area that I think there's a lot of good work being done. It just maybe moves at a pace that is painfully slow. I don't have anything insightful to say about it except that thank you to the people who are working on it. And I support you. I think the TSET program is a step in the right direction, but even that has been very slow and not without its own issues. So,
Yeah. Still work to be done, but thankful for the work that is being done.
well said. Yes.
So, yeah. So, okay. So, obviously, listening to you speak about your background and about the industry, it's really clear how passionate you are about this. And I, I wonder if there are any moments or series of moments that stand out to you as kind of confirming that, yes, I am in the right place at the right time. I'm here for a reason.
Ooh, good question. I'm trying to think like there's plenty of times in the moment where it's like, of course, yes. And then there's like quickly like, oh, what's the next fire I'm trying to put out? So it's hard to really think. I wish I had a super answer right away. I'm thinking, I guess I always come back to the patient. And so like so we've done some clinical trials in Australia, and various team members of ours have gone over and been able to support the trials and be a part of them. And just hearing the stories that they bring back, it's just like, oh, yes, we have to keep doing this. One of our employees was there and came back with a couple stories. But one of them was just like, after the study visit, the patient was speaking to her and was saying, it's a conspiracy of silence. This is a huge problem. So many of us are suffering. We're so glad you're here. And then it's other things like we did, for instance, a human factors study that was really helpful to us and we learned a lot from. And in that study, it was like patients came in to do mock use of the device so we could improve our training materials and also, all parts of the user experience. And it was amazing to me. So patients, participants, I should say, got zero benefit theoretically about being in that study. It was all for us to learn how to do this better. I mean, we did compensate them, but marginally, right? And so many people wanted to be in that study. And even if it was the early on patient who had, I'm going to make it up, but had like, oh, the user manual didn't make sense to them or something, they were still like, I'm so glad to be here to help you because this product needs to be out there. And so it's like, this is incredible. Yes. And that part is really rewarding to me. For me, it's the patients and their feedback and just their enthusiasm. And then, also the healthcare providers too. We have a lot of wonderful physicians that we work with and their support has been helpful. Like for instance, as I mentioned, we put a paper out there and one of our clinical advisors I think a couple of them highlighted to us that like, we need to do a second paper on a specific subset of that data because it's super valuable and hasn't been out there before, which maybe the clinicians do that for everything they do because they know the scene and they know what needs to be published. But it just felt like we have a lot of people who really are rowing in the same direction and really want to make an impact like we do.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that's incredible. Thank you for sharing those stories. I think, as you alluded to earlier, because your role has so many components, because that's the space you're in and you've got so much going on, I think it's really compelling to have something to hold on to when it gets hard and go, you know what? I remember that patient who was so thankful just to have the opportunity to be a part of it and just wait until this gets into the hands of so many more.
Totally.
Yeah. Yeah. And so for you, you obviously have a very strong background in engineering and innovation. How was it for you going from that to also now being an entrepreneur and having a business and having to also learn all of those skills as well? How was that transition?
Fun. I think that there's a lot of personal growth and I've learned a lot about myself and where I find passion. So I think there's definitely a lot of hard parts too, but one thing is that I think there's also a heavy dose of naivete that was important. I didn't know what I didn't know. And so here I am 10 years later. I think, in the beginning too, I was not, what do I say? I wasn't convinced. I wasn't convinced that I could be a CEO, that I should be or could be. And so I think that was and is maybe still definitely a continuous journey too. And so why did I think that? What does that mean to me? And where am I now? That's been certainly a learning process, but that's also like why I said fun, because I get to do such a variety of stuff. Like I get to have this opportunity to speak to you on this podcast. I get to work with our clinical advisors on a paper, and I also get to apply for grants. And there's a lot of hard things that come with all of those things, but I feel like it's been a really, I don't know, just an incredible opportunity to have a job that requires so many different things. It also requires me to do financial modeling, which I'm terrible, well, was terrible at, have learned and much better at, but also don't really love doing. So it teaches you what you might look for in a future chapter of your life as well. But I'm someone who really thrives on, I have a very curious mind. So trying new things and figuring out new things, and that I think that curiosity is well satiated by an entrepreneur's life. Managing your own psychology is really difficult, but that's why you have a great community of people around you, both within the entrepreneur community and outside of it.
Oh my word. I think I just need to take what you just said, those last couple of sentences, and just make it into a quote, because that was so well articulated.
Oh, thank you.
I cannot think of a better way to describe that journey. So thank you but also thank you for being vulnerable and willing to share that, because it is such a journey and it is a learning curve, but kudos to you for embracing it with an attitude of fun. Like, let's just learn something new, and it might not go great the first time, but that's okay. I'll try again.
Yeah, I was like, well, if any of my investors are listening, I have gotten really good at a lot of these things, so y'all don't need to worry. But I do think that's maybe the blessing and the curse of being a first-time entrepreneur. So I think, there's certainly a lot of benefits for having done it before and knowing exactly what to expect. But I think with anything in maybe any regulated industry or maybe any startup, really, there's always going to be curveballs. So that keeps you excited.
It's never boring. It keeps you on your toes. There's at least that.
Yes, absolutely.
Excellent. Well, pivoting the conversation just for fun, imagine that you were to be offered $1 million to teach a masterclass on anything you want. It can be within your industry, but it doesn't have to be. What would you choose to teach and why?
Oh, that's interesting too. And that's a nice paycheck.
Right?
Let's see. Getting right to what do I think I'm good enough at to teach a class about. So, I think one thing that I've been thinking about a lot recently is scientific communication and how different voices get amplified, and how the kind of stereotypical scientific persona is not the one that wants to be necessarily on social media with a gazillion followers and all these TikTok videos. So I think that I would like to teach the class in concert with, I have a lot of ideas of like who would be great people to collaborate with in order to teach, or really to help promote more scientific discourse in a conversation that's appropriate and approachable for anyone. I think that obviously our country has faced a lot of division, and I don't think that's really true. I think that a lot of that is, well, there certainly is a lot of division. I don't mean that. I just mean that I think there's a path to human connection via communication, and that wouldn't it be cool if we could help bridge conversations? And obviously I am a scientist. I think of myself as a scientist, so want to think about ways to provide other voices out there to be amplified as well, or perhaps amplify the right voices to help promote just a more enriched dialogue than what is often presented as the country's dialogue today.
I love that.
It's kind of rambling. I get back to you with my course description, but that's probably where I would go.
Syllabi due Tuesday. No, I think that is absolutely incredible. And I love that, because I think that is something that's missing, and there's some translation error that occurs. And one of the things that I'm passionate about is helping to bridge that gap between, so I'm right on board with you, but to bridge that gap between maybe taking some what are traditionally considered complex ideas, concepts, whatever, and distilling it down to a more accessible format. And because everyone learns differently, it's just helpful to have a wider range of options.
Totally.
And so I love what you would be passionate about sharing. I mean, I would sign up for that masterclass
You can help me teach
today.
it, I think.
Okay. Deal. We'll get back on that.
Okay.
Excellent. Yeah. How would you wish to be remembered after you leave this world?
You have some great questions. Yeah, let's see. I've honestly never thought about that. I think that what would I want people? Well, I think about like what I would want my friends to think, that like they were loved and that they hopefully shared that love broadly. But then let's see, that's not really like remembering. Yeah, I guess maybe it is. So yeah, that I'm a lover, a curious person, and that there is a lot of beauty in the everyday, and so there's a lot to be excited about, even on the hard days.
Yeah, I love that. And then final question, what is one thing that makes you smile every time you see or think about it?
Certainly my family. I have a 4-year-old son, and keeps me very present and cracks me up continuously. And so my husband and I are very lucky to have him. And obviously my husband makes me laugh a lot. And so I really appreciate them. And so even when, the workday is hard, I feel really fortunate to have a very rich personal life outside of that. So my family and then my friends also.
Oh, yes, of course. That's wonderful. And I'm so glad you have that amazing support system to bring that smile to your face, especially on the tough days.
Absolutely.
Well, Holly, this has been a wonderful conversation. I'm so thankful for you and what you're doing in this space, and the fact that you're tackling an issue that affects so many people, and that you're just bringing all this innovation to, and you're so passionate about sharing that in a way that resonates with people. So I just want to first say, thank you so much for the work that you're doing. I know it's not easy, and there are probably days where you just kind of want to, toss something in the trash. But honestly, thank you for continuing to do the work you're doing. It's not nothing, and I want to appreciate that.
Well, that is very kind. Thank you. And that means a lot. And thank you for doing what you're doing too, to give people like me a chance to share, and also us to listen to others sharing their stories. And for asking questions that are more about me as a whole person too. I think that when I've been in other conversations, sometimes and there's nothing wrong with those, but it's fun to have, we can ask these questions. I'm like, wow, I'm going to do some thinking this weekend about how I want to be remembered, because I've never thought about that.
Yeah, there you go. I love it. Well, and we are so honored to be making a donation on your behalf as a thank you for your time today to the Equal Justice Initiative, which provides legal representation to prisoners who may have been wrongly convicted of crimes, poor prisoners without effective representation, and others who may have been denied a fair trial. So thank you for choosing that organization to support. And we just wish you continued success as you work to change lives for a better world.
Well, thank you. It's been a pleasure. Thank you.
Me too. And thank you so much for our listeners for tuning in. And if you're feeling as inspired as I am right now, I would love if you would share this episode with a colleague or two, and we will catch you next time.
The Leading Difference is brought to you by Velentium. Velentium is a full-service CDMO with 100% in-house capability to design, develop, and manufacture medical devices, from Class 2 wearables to Class 3 active implantable medical devices. Velentium specializes in active implantables, leads, programmers, and accessories across a wide range of indications, such as neuromodulation, deep brain stimulation, cardiac management, and diabetes management. Velentium's core competencies include electrical, firmware, and mechanical design, mobile apps, embedded cybersecurity, human factors and usability, automated test systems, systems engineering, and contract manufacturing. Velentium works with clients worldwide, from startups seeking funding to established Fortune 100 companies. Visit Velentium.com to explore your next step in medical device development.